Hi everybody, and welcome back to this week's edition of the Fireside Chats with me, Alex Hammond, candidate for 116th Assembly District here in the North Country. Today's topic we're going to be discussing is bail reform. It's a hot topic, and for good reason. So my thoughts on bail reform are that there definitely needs to be something done. I think the system that was in place before January 1 of 2020 had some flaws. But I think the current system that was put in place and passed last spring through the Assembly and Senate is not the proper reforms that we need. I don't think that local law enforcement, as far as sheriff departments, DAs, and judges, I don't think that they had enough of a conversation, or were part of the conversation rather, when these laws were being thought up and passed. And I really do think it's taking a toll. I know it's taking a toll on the people in the system right now. Here in Waddington, we have a town judge and a town clerk who administer court every second Wednesday of the month, and they are swamped. There are so many different things about this law that just make it harder for the people who are trying to enforce the law to do their job. And I think that is what we need to look at when we look into repealing this and replacing this bail reform law. If I can just go back a little bit to when this law was being passed last spring in 2019. It was passed with the budget, which I am opposed to in the first place. I don't think it has anything to do with the budget, bail reform. I think it has to do with some people from New York City knew that they had, kind of screwed up with, if you had heard about the case that they had at Rikers Island, where a young man was kept in jail for about 2 years without even ever being, he was just accused of a crime. He was never actually sentenced for a crime. And that young man finally was found out that he had been there, he got out, and he ended up committing suicide. I think all of us can agree that that's a horrible situation that we never want to happen ever again in the state, whether it's down in the city or up here. But I think that the measures that were taken were a little bit too far. I think we need to empower our judges in order to make decisions, but also give them guidance in order to make sure that everyone is getting a fair shake when it comes to our judicial system in the state of New York. So back in 2019, when this law was being passed, like I said, it was during the budget season, and it was passed with the budget. I think it should have been debated openly on the floor, and I think that members of the Assembly and the Senate should have taken more of an approach to oppose it than what they did. I think that's a very retroactive approach from everybody who's in Albany right now to, we didn't really hear calls for, replacement or calls for reform for the bail reform law until it became basically a reality that this was going to become law in Jan 1 of 2020. So around, October, November, you started hearing politicians speak up against it. And my biggest problem with that is, where were these people when the law was actually being passed and made into law back in 2019? And, I'll let you draw your own conclusions on that. But that's my biggest thing, is we shouldn't have to be taking a retroactive approach right now. It should have been dealt with, and we should have had the right law passed back in 2019. But since that's not the reality, and we're now in the reality of it is law, I hope that New York State continues to support our local law enforcement, our judicial staff as well, through the process, because it's already been a very, very hard transition. And with everything that's going on today with the coronavirus and a lot of other problems that are facing our state right now, we need to remember those folks who are on the front line of helping to make sure that the community is safe. Because right now, this is a public safety concern, is having people who are dangerous out on the streets when they should be in custody. And don't get me wrong, I think we're all on the same page here. Everybody has their right to fair trial by jury and their day in court, and that's not what we're trying to do by any means. Like I said, there are some reforms that should be done, but we went way too far and way too city on the reforms that were done here. So let's go back to the drawing table. Let's repeal and replace with getting those people from local law enforcement, DAs, the actual sheriffs, and the judicial folks that we have at our towns and villages and county to all get on the same page and figure out what we need to do. So that's my thoughts on bail reform. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section. Comment again on what other topics you'd like to see me discuss, and I'll see you next time for our Fireside Chats. Thanks, guys.